You know what's interesting about you? You're probably fine right now. At least that's what your face says. That's what you told the last person who asked. I'm good. Maybe you even smiled when you said it. A real smile too, not a fake one. You've gotten so good at that part that even you sometimes forget you're doing it. But underneath that, there's this weight. Not sadness exactly, not depression, just tired. Tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Tired in a way you can't really explain to someone who hasn't felt it. Tired of being the person who holds it together. Tired of being okay. Tired of being the one people don't worry about. Because you never give them a reason to. And if something about that just hit you in the chest, stay with me. Because what I'm about to tell you explains not just why you do this, but why you were almost built to. Here's what most people don't realize. The people who smile through the hard stuff, they're not fake. They're not people pleasers in the shallow sense. They're not performing happiness. They are some of the most emotionally intelligent, deeply aware, quietly extraordinary people in any room. And that same depth that makes them so remarkable is exactly what exhausts them. Let me explain what's actually happening inside a mind like yours. You notice things other people don't. Not because you're trying to, because you can't not. Someone walks into the room and you already know, before they say a single word, that something's wrong. You catch the half-second flicker in their expression, the slight change in how they're holding their shoulders, the way their laugh was just a little too quick. Other people missed it completely. You registered it like a vibration in the air. This isn't a personality quirk. This is your nervous system doing something genuinely sophisticated. Research in social neuroscience has found that certain people process emotional and social cues at a neurological level others simply don't access. You don't just hear words, you hear what changed in someone's voice between yesterday and today. And here's where it starts to get complicated. Because when you're that tuned in, you don't get to turn it off. You pick up on tension before anyone names it. You feel the shift in energy when something's wrong in a group. You absorb the mood of every room you walk into, like you're made of something more permeable than other people. And by the time you get home, you've spent the entire day processing not just your own emotions, but everyone else's too. No wonder you're tired. But here's the twist. You probably don't let anyone see that. Because somewhere along the way, you learned something very specific. You learned that your emotions were a lot. That showing how deeply you felt things made other people uncomfortable. Maybe they told you directly. Maybe they just went quiet when you got too real, and you learned to read that silence. Either way, the message landed. Be easier, be lighter, smile. So you did. And you got incredibly good at it. The really painful part? It works. People love being around you. You make them feel comfortable, seen, safe. You hold space for everyone else's mess while quietly carrying your own. And because you seem fine, because you present so well, nobody thinks to check in. Nobody asks how you really are. And when someone does, the smile comes up automatically before you've even decided to put it there. This is where it started. And I want you to actually think about this part, because it's not about your personality. It's about what you learned when you were young. If you grew up in an environment that was emotionally unpredictable, and that doesn't just mean dramatic or chaotic, it means any environment where you couldn't quite trust how the emotional temperature of a room would change. You learned to read people early, not as a skill you practiced, as a survival adaptation. You became an expert at detecting mood shifts, at knowing when someone needed to be approached carefully, at being whatever the room needed so that things stayed calm. You were probably described as so mature for your age. What that actually meant was you figured out how to manage your own needs so that other people didn't have to. You learned to shrink the parts of yourself that made things uncomfortable. You learned that some feelings were safe to show and others needed to stay inside, dressed up in something more acceptable, like a smile. And here's the thing that nobody ever said to you, that maybe you really need to hear. You weren't too sensitive. You weren't dramatic. You weren't overreacting. You were a child learning to navigate emotional complexity that most adults would have struggled with. And you did it by becoming fluent in a language that other people never even knew existed. The problem is that language has a cost. Because when you spend years, maybe decades, translating your real feelings into something more palatable, something starts to happen. The translation becomes automatic. You stop even checking in with yourself before you perform okay. Someone asks how you are, and the answer is already out of your mouth before your brain has a chance to say, "Actually, I don't know. I haven't asked myself that in a while." And then the exhaustion compounds. Because you're not just tired from the external stuff, the job, the responsibilities, the relationships, the noise of being alive in this particular moment in history. You're tired from the internal labor of managing your own emotional experience in real time, for an audience, every single day. That's an invisible kind of tired. The kind that feels almost embarrassing to admit, because from the outside, everything looks fine. Other people seem to move through the world more lightly. Things roll off them. They forget conversations you can still replay word for word. They let things go in a way that feels genuinely impossible to you. Like they're doing some emotional release move you were never taught. And part of you wonders if there's something wrong with you. If you're just weaker somehow. More fragile. You're not. Here's what's actually true. The same wiring that makes you feel things deeply is the same wiring that makes you extraordinary at connection, at creativity, at understanding people on a level that leaves them feeling genuinely seen, maybe for the first time in years. The same sensitivity that exhausts you is the same sensitivity that makes you the person people call when things fall apart. The person who finds the exact right words. The person who feels stories. In books, in music, in a stranger's face across a room, as if they happen to you personally. That is not weakness dressed up as empathy. That is a particular kind of human intelligence that the world genuinely needs. It just doesn't come with a manual. And nobody ever sat you down and said, "Here is how to feel things this deeply without it consuming you. Here is how to hold your emotions instead of swallowing them. Here is how to be present for other people without disappearing from yourself." So instead, you learned the smile. And the smile kept you safe. And it kept people comfortable. And it worked until the weight of everything underneath it started to feel too heavy to carry quietly. Here's what I want you to take from this. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not a burden hiding behind a brave face. You are a person who developed a very sophisticated coping strategy in a world that didn't give you better options. And that strategy served you. It got you here. But you don't have to keep using it alone. The tiredness you feel isn't weakness. It's the accumulated weight of decades of caring about other people, about how things feel, about the world, at a level of depth that most people won't ever touch. That deserves not to be hidden. That deserves to be met. So the next time someone asks how you are, and you feel that smile come up automatically, try just pausing for 1 second before it arrives. Not to break down, not to overwhelm anyone, just to actually check in with yourself first. Just to acknowledge, even privately, that there's something real underneath the okay. Because you've spent so long making sure everyone else feels seen. Maybe it's time someone sees you. You don't have to fix everything right now. You don't have to suddenly become someone who shares every feeling out loud. But you can start by being honest with yourself about what you're actually carrying, and maybe, slowly, letting 1 or 2 people pass the smile. You spent years becoming fluent in everyone else's emotions. You're allowed to learn your own language too. If this video hits somewhere real for you, there's something else I think you should watch next. It's about why emotionally intelligent people so often end up feeling the most alone. And if any part of today resonated, that one will explain something about you that you've probably never had words for.